get started. I know that a few more people may drop in. I think we had about 10 or 12 registrants, so we'll see how that goes. A couple of quick Zoom norms, although I know that you are Zoom experts at this point, but if you can keep yourself muted during the presentation, that would be great. As questions come to your mind, if you put the questions in the chat, we do have a question time at the end, but just so that we sort of stay on our pacing, we want to make sure that we hold your questions and also save your questions for the right time. So like stick those questions in the chat at any point. And then I will just let Marti introduce herself in a moment. Not everybody here is a current family member. My name is Yvonne Faisal. I'm the Director of Academics. My undergraduate work resulted in degrees in math, physics, and electrical engineering. So math is near and dear to my heart. And Marti similarly finds a great deal of passion in this topic.
Yeah, I have my degree in mathematics, my master's in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis in technology. And I've been teaching for about 16 years, mathematics at the high school level, everything from pre-algebra through calculus. So my greatest joy was taking kids all the way through 4 years of algebra to calculus. So I'm in the right spot and I'm loving it. And this is wonderful and I'm happy to be here.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's get started. We wanted to talk about some of the emerging trends that are happening in the mathematics world right now. And if you look over a long period of time, mathematics instruction has actually tended to swing on kind of a spectrum. An emphasis on facts, an emphasis on application, facts, application, and sort of back and forth. And you know, that you can find proponents in every single camp on every single spectrum all around the world. Some of the most current emerging trends in our area of the world is that there is an emphasis on statistics and data science over calculus. And that has emerged because fewer fields use calculus and a ton of fields use statistics and data science. And we were really noticing that people didn't have that statistical background that was really necessary for a lot of fields. And in part that was because we were pushing calculus for college admissions. Another trend is slowing things down at the middle school level. For quite a while, we were seeing that 8th graders took algebra. That was considered the norm, is to have 8th grade algebra. And we're seeing that that trend is really being pushed on in a number of ways, so that algebra is a 9th grade topic instead of an 8th grade topic. Another thing that we have seen is the idea of including multiple perspectives or multiple strategies as you do problems. In talking with the students earlier today, we talked about the long division problem, right? How did you learn long division, and how did your parents or your family help you with long division, and that there was a real difference in our generations on how that was taught. Another trend is this idea of you want classes with a low floor and a high ceiling. So sort of a de-emphasis on tracking, that you don't have a high level of math and a lower level of math, but instead everybody's in the same math course and there is differentiated instruction. Two other trends are that there is integrated content, or an emphasis on integrated or learning in context. That's been around in the sense of real world problems for a while. But the real world problems were very typically 2 trains leave a station and go here. So it was still very mathematically perspectivied, not a word, but I'm going to use it. And so now they're moving more into integrated content and using social justice and various other contexts for math instruction and for math application. There's a link down here at the bottom, and I'm actually going to stick it right here in the chat. Feel free to copy it and look at it later, not right now, but later. It's an article that's talking about what some of these trends are. So if you are interested in reading things, feel free to go gather more information in the future. Okay, so where are we at? These are things that Marti says pretty frequently in the classroom. And we wanted to like dig into it. So what does this sound like to the kids? What does Marti mean when she says it? And so we're going to let her talk about what does she mean.
Yeah, so a big thing I'm really trying to do with my students is to get them to think like a mathematician and even envision themselves as a mathematician. Ways to do that are like questioning and debating and breaking something. Like, does this work? Does it always work? When does it not work? Can I break it? That idea of building knowledge as opposed to getting told knowledge as well is definitely a trait of a mathematician. Discovering what is truth and in mathematics and what is truth, what is false, as opposed to like right and wrong, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I love my kids to be curious. I love them to tinker and to test something first to get kind of their bearings and get kind of into the problem. Engaging in peer feedback, I think, is incredibly helpful, not only for the language of mathematics and the understanding of mathematics. I think it was adorable today in class. Taylor was talking with Anna in math about this problem, and Anna was like, I don't know that I really need help. And Taylor's like, well, Marty says that if I really understand it, then I can really explain it. And Anna was like, well, all right, go for it. So it was super cute just to kind of hear that parroted back of like, if you really understand it, then you can explain it to someone, especially someone who might be skeptical of whether it's true or false, what you're saying, to be able to defend your thinking and all of that. So that idea of like engaging in peer feedback, looking at their mistakes, looking at your own mistakes, and engaging that way. And I also, with that, is embracing failure. Like, failure is just going to happen. You cannot have innovation or learning without failure. So allowing space and time and pride, if that's possible, in your failure, seeing that as positive, not as a negative, is something that I really try to push for in my classes this year. And it's really cute to see how that like comes back from the students and like, yay, you made a mistake. They're all like jumping up and down, and then they found it and then they can fix it and correct it. And it was super cute. So yeah, those are some topics that you're going to hear me talk about with your kids. And if they come home spouting some of this stuff as well, like they're like, all right, some little seeds are sprouting there. So it's super cute. And yeah, Yvonne's going to talk a little bit about how that translate into kind of our values and our systems here.
So at SF Girls, we really are trying to do education where we're thinking about why, or what is it that we're trying to do as compared to this is what's done. And so when Marty and I really thought about the math program and how we wanted to structure things and how we wanted to approach and what we wanted to do for curriculum, these are the things that we really value across the board, but particularly in math. We really value a growth mindset in the sense that I'm going almost like gamification, right? Like there's this sense that you can try it and try it and try it, and the dragon may slay you 40 times in a row, but then you're going to get it. And hopefully it's not 40 times in math, but there's this idea that you keep leveling up, you keep getting stronger. And if you can't win the game on the first time through the game, that's not unusual. In fact, that's expected. So this idea of growth mindset and continuing to get stronger is really important. Being brave, asking questions takes a level of vulnerability and a level of bravery that is really hard for all of us. And I think a 14-year-old student, it is, especially if you haven't had a culture of that before, it takes a lot of bravery to embrace this. Collegiality, working together, respecting each other's perspectives, looking at things from different points of view. And one thing that Marty does a really great job on in the classroom is not just letting someone get it and move on, but really kind of slowing it down. So like, okay, wait, you saw it that way. Go talk with so-and-so. They saw it a different way. Are they the same? Or are they two fundamentally different things? Or is there a combination? So this idea of really playing up the value of perspective is important. And then mathematical prowess, right? That there is this like elegance, and there's like a skill set, and there's like a fighting almost that comes through, that you get to this idea of, I am strong as a mathematician. I can do this. I can fight. I can use it. I can apply it. And so these are things that we really value for our mathematics program.
Yes, absolutely. And I love the mathematical prowess too, of like this idea of a tool set. Like you have all these tools in your toolbox, and like, which one are you going to use at what spot? It's like, yeah, thank you. So how do we do this? So we're talking about a little bit with the habits of mind is one of our first courses that students come in and take. Yvonne already mentioned low floor, high ceiling. That also comes into play with certain problems. I'm going to show you one in just a moment. That low floor, meaning anybody can enter it. It's not very difficult of a problem to even start and get your feet wet, but the way to like exit the problem is super high level. By the time you've learned and discussed and figured something out, you have grown quite a bit within this one problem set or this one question that we're going to develop. Setting up a collaborative culture. I believe it's my pedagogy that the person who's doing the talking is the person who's doing the learning. So if I can get a student to say something that I could say, it's always better if they can say it. To each other and to themselves. They're owning it, they're hearing it, they're speaking it. And that just really solidifies retention as well as deep learning from what I've seen. So there's always this idea of working together, discussing, debating, questioning that's going on just constantly in the classroom. It's never like, oh yeah, it was 15, we're moving on. So it's always debatable, like, is it true? Is it false? When is it true? Is it always false? Like it's kind of a fun, different aspect of the classroom to be in. We're looking at unpacking bias and building perspective, especially in the math world. There's a whole lot of that typically goes on. And to just understand that we are here, we are working together. Your perspective on this problem, the way you see it, is valid. And that actually can lead to very like a deep understanding for me, just to be able to see the problem the way you see it, builds mathematical knowledge, prowess, a foundation that we can like move from. Creating shared language. I think this is kind of cool. So sometimes I say like, who speaks Allison? So let's say Allison just had this idea. This is how I see it. And she does this explanation. Whether or not I get it or not is not the problem. So I usually kind of share that with like, well, who understood that? Who speaks Allison? Can someone translate what Allison just said? And so they're taking what someone else said, kind of putting their own spin, their own words on it to process it within themselves verbally. And it also, again, validates that person's thinking, that other people are listening, they're hearing it and building onto it or adding onto it or kind of tweaking it with the way they see it, which is kind of lovely. I use this also to develop high-level academic language. So if they're building a brand new word they've never heard before, and they're just talking about it and they say something like, oh, it's the thingy, or it's you know, the side of the thing, and they can't really put the high-level academic word on it. Usually we talk about like, oh yeah, the thingy. Oh, you mean the side length or the perimeter of this rectangle. And so like interchanging and connecting their verbiage with the high-level academic, I think also builds this idea of language, which in my opinion is really what mathematics is a new language, and how to speak it and write it is a big deal. So we can always think more than we can say, and we can always say more than we can write. So I'm trying to get them to constantly be speaking and trying to get what's in their brain out and discussing with other people. And then building the language up from there, and then adding, like writing it down, adding notation, making it concise. I also, like I think I mentioned before, the true false instead of right wrong. Right wrong is very arbitrary and kind of moral in my opinion. And mathematics, it's just either it's true or it's false, or sometimes it's true, or sometimes it's not. And when is it true and when is it false? And that really takes the ambiguity out of it, and it takes the I'm wrong or I'm right out of it. And it just looks at the problem on its own mathematically, whether it's true, whether it's false, and we can look at it that way. So you'll hear me say some of that as a parent. It's really hard to change from like right, wrong. I still I think Yvonne was in my classroom and I accidentally like flubbed and was like, is that right? And Yvonne's like, you mean true? And I'm like, good job, Yvonne. Yes, it is really hard to switch because that is so fundamental in the teaching and learning of mathematics, of right and wrong, as opposed to true, false. So those are some small language pieces that I'm trying to like weave into the classroom to build this capacity for learning that we're talking about. So I think now's the time we're going to jump into a little math lesson. So welcome, class. I'm Marty. I'm going to be your math teacher for tonight. I have a quick little lesson for you. I might have like ask an actual question. If you want to unmute and shout, that's fine, but I'm going to move at a definite faster pace than I would. This would take an entire class period, like 90-minute class period if it was in my class. So we're going to look at a visual pattern. Here is a set of dots. I want you to just look at the dots for a second on your screen if you can see them. My first question is, what do you notice about the dots?
What do you what?
Notice.
What do you notice?
I can see two squares.
Ooh, Judy can see two squares. Anybody notice anything else?
One is bigger than the other.
One is bigger than the other. Yes. All right. How many dots are there? And which is the fastest way to count them? Is there a way to count the dots without counting every single dot? Because that's doing the most. So think about it for a second. If you think you know how many dots there are, drop it in the chat box. Let's just type it in. I'll give you a moment. If you can't think that fast, that's fine. I would definitely give everybody in my classroom time to answer this
25
question.
and 8 is 33.
Ooh, Sarah.
I love the verbal processing.
Judy's
going
verbally
on there.
processing it. It's great.
I will not take credit for that. I think Sean is signed in as me.
Wonderful. That is a very glorious picture of Sarah that pops up next to that. Bob's got 36. Sarah's got 25 plus 16 minus 4, which I think might be different. Interesting.
25 plus 8,
16.
25.
Got a 37 now. Oh, Bob's changing his answer.
4.
All right. That's okay, because you know what? Mistakes are good. It's how our brain learns. So I would in class get everybody to like shout it out at the same time. Once everyone's given me a thumbs up, they have an answer. We all just kind of shout it out, and I like write every single number on the board, and we kind of discuss, and then I let them kind of count and debate and like how they got their number. But now I'm going to move you into like the next part of like, all right, what shapes do you see? Judy already said squares, 2 squares of different sizes. I'm going to do something to the picture, and I'm going to see if this changes the way you look at it. Does that change the way you count the number of dots? If I highlight it like that, so I kind of see like 2 overlapping squares, which I think goes to like the 25 and the 16. So 25 is like the 5 by 5 and the 16 is like 4 by 4, and they overlap. Because they overlap, we got to subtract some, right, that are kind of overlapping. Well, what if I colored them like that? Does that change the way you see and count the number of dots? That one's kind of funky. Does anyone see how that one has shapes?
Yep.
What do you see here? I'll give you a moment to chat.
Rectangles.
Ooh, rectangles. So like a vertical and horizontal rectangles with like 2 little squares. But again, the rectangles are like overlapping again, right? I feel like they're the same size. The squares are nice. We got a 3 by 3 and a 2 by 2. So we can change the way we see it. What about this way?
See, that's what I did in my head. I did 7 squared
Yep,
minus the ones that are missing.
minus the missing pieces. And they happen to be the same size rectangles. Anybody else see it Bob's way?
That's the way I looked at the big, and then.
Love it. Love it. Is there a different way that you see it? Does anyone see it differently that didn't get brought up? I'll give you a moment. Or did we get them all? Do you think there's more ways that we didn't see? Do you think your students, when they did this, saw different ways that you guys didn't come up with?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Counting them one at a time.
Counting them one at a time. Yes, but that's doing the most. They don't want to do that. One of the students, I believe it was Raina saw it as the top 2 by 4 rectangle on the top, and then the middle one, like a 2 by 7, and then a bottom one of a 3 by 5. So like 3 rectangles stacked on each other. Do you guys see that way? So there's so many different ways to see it. There's so many different ways to count it, which is kind of beautiful. And you're like, great, but what does this have to do with math? Oh, I'm so glad you guys asked. So let's assume this is figure 3 in a pattern. Does that make sense? This is figure number 3. Any guesses on what you think figure 4 might look like? Do you think it gets bigger? Do you think it gets smaller? Does it stay the same? Do we have enough information? Judy's shaking her head no. So technically we don't have enough information, but I always love to ask, what does figure 4 look like? And the girls absolutely know. They know exactly what figure 4 looks like. Yeah, but we don't have enough information to establish figure 4. So you know what? I'm just going to give you figure 4. There's figure 4. That's what figure 4 looks like. Do you see a pattern now? Do you think you can figure out what figure 2 looks like? And perhaps figure 1 looks like? And then I would have them sketch this in the notebook. They're noticing a pattern. It's increasing. So like the base is increasing by 1 dot. Is that right? So it's like if you're looking at it Judy's way with the 2 squares, and notice I'm saying Judy's way, not like way number 1, but like naming it like Raina's method or Judy's method or Bob's method. And this is how I would teach class. And then we're going to look at it this certain way. So I could give you figure 2 and I could give you figure 1. And here's where the really tricky, like high level ceiling starts to come into the problem is, what about figure number 8? Could you tell me how many dots are in figure number 8? And that's where the kids are like, oh my gosh, okay, well, how do I do this? And they're trying to look for patterns. They're trying to look for shortcuts. Miss Marty, this is doing the most, right? How do we figure this out? And so I walk them through developing a rule. And this is where the beauty of just dots and geometric figures gets into algebra. And we develop an actual algebraic expression. And your students right now are so good at this. They are so good at this, developing rules based on patterns, that my students yesterday discovered and developed and derived the formula for the area of a regular polygon. And they just came up with it and created it on their own. And because we are constantly developing rules, developing algebraic expressions from scratch and not just being given algebraic expressions, they were able to see mathematics as something they can build and develop and create. They understand the idea of a variable and something that changes based on the figure number here, something's changing. And based on this, they actually came up with 5 different algebraic expressions that represent this. And the crazy thing is they end up being really long. And I think Yvonne's gonna type a few into the chat box. Like if you want, Sarah, if you, and somebody else hacked into your account wants to like try to write one in there. Oh, we got one, Yvonne did that one. This is one of the formula. It looks like 2 of the formulas. The little caret is the exponents. This ends up being quadratic. This is a quadratic algebraic expression, which is, if you remember like the big U, right? That is like difficult for algebra. And this is abstract here, but the kids are developing this themselves and they're creating it. And they got like 5 of these. And we said, are they true? Do they all work? But how do they all work if they all look different based on the way you're adding? Like if you see it Raina's way, you're going to have 3 rectangles added together. If you see it Judy's way, you're going to have the squares added and then subtracted. I think that's the first one, the n plus 4 squared and the n plus 1 squared minus the n minus 1 squared. That's Judy's way of seeing it. And they're developing these formulas on their own. We can graph them, we can simplify them to see that they're actually indeed the same exact expression to get a brand new expression. So they're able to see all of these things just in one very simple low floor problem of how many dots do you see? And we can exit them all the way at quadratic expressions and functions within a matter of days. Once they've built this idea of developing, seeing patterns, developing algebraic expressions. And I use that in habits of mind to build the rest of the courses. So like geometry, everything we're building, I have not given them a single formula. This whole year, they've developed everything themselves. And they haven't needed formulas, they've created formulas. Slope formulas, area formulas, perimeters, like whatever you need, you can find the formula. If you know it's changing, you could write an like a variable for it. And you can find a pattern, make a table, maybe look at it geometrically. They're developing these rules of patterns. So if I take you back here, did you see any of this stuff kind of happening in the lesson? Like, did you see a collaborative culture? Did you see the low floor, high ceiling? Did you see us building perspective, unpacking some bias? Looking at Judy, like, did you see, like, can anybody explain what Judy sees, right? And like this true false as opposed to this is the right way to see it and the wrong way, or this is, yep, you got it right, let's move on. That doesn't happen. It's like, is this true? Does it work? Is kind of a flip on that. Does anyone want to share anything based on what else you kind of saw or felt based on that. And I think Judy, are you muted again? Or can I just not hear you?
I'm muted.
Oh,
Yes,
there you go.
now I'm unmuted.
There you go. What were you saying?
Oh, nothing.
Oh, great. Did anybody else see something or want to share something based on that? You can drop it in the chat box too. Oh, she got another expression in there.
That last one was the way that Raina saw it, which is like the 3 rectangles that she was seeing. I was curious naming it, right? So Bob, how did it feel when Marty was like Bob's way? Like, how does it feel to then you somewhat own it a little bit?
Well, yeah, it's nice in a way, I guess, to get acknowledgement of the way someone else sees something that the way you don't see it, and to hear that there are different ways to look at a problem and solve it, because they both can be right.
Yeah.
There's just one answer, and that's a good thing for kids to learn in math.
Yeah.
And in life, right? So,
There's always more than one way to do it. There's always more than one way to look at something.
so I like your true false versus right wrong approach as well. I think it's a lot of things here that I love.
Yeah. And as you're helping your kiddos, like with some math, those are some easy, quick questions. Like maybe you look at it and you're like, I have no idea what you're doing. Either like, I don't know where you are and what it is you're learning. You can always ask those questions. What did you get? And how do you know that it's true? Those are questions that the students are going to hear a lot. So they should be able to be like, oh, well, here's how I got it. Here's what I did. And here's how I checked to see if it's true or false. So it's like you can jump straight into a narrative with whatever they're working on, with just a few short questions with the right language that they're like, oh yeah, that sounds like something Marty would say. So
and I'm going to name, I'm going to build off of what Bob named, that, it kind of feels good to be acknowledged, or that was my way. One thing that we definitely noticed with the students is that there is also that level of fear, like that's my way, it's now named, what if it's wrong? Now everybody knows that my way didn't work, right? And so there is also this element of normalizing the fact that sometimes your way is going to be true and sometimes your way is not going to be true. But because everybody is participating in that, what we have seen over the course of, the last 18 weeks or so is really a sense of, oh, okay, as compared to like shaming. And so this sense of when we talk about fear of failure, really failing in and of itself, making a mistake is not a big deal. What we really want to take off from it is the shaming component of it, and really let them exercise bravery and ownership.
absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Yvonne.
Yes, so Marty talked a little bit about how we are doing this in class and building capacity. I want to talk a little bit about how we are building the structure or scaffolding or the system. So we have a few different components, design components that we put in. One is we believe strongly that rigor is the constant, that all of the students are capable of doing this work, and time is the variable. Some of us are going to need a little bit longer to do this, and some of us are not going to need a little bit longer to do this. Today in class, Marty and I were talking with the students. I identify as someone who was pretty quick in math and like ate it up and wanted to go really fast. Marty identifies as someone who wanted more time, who needed more time, and was a deeper, longer thinker. I gave them the analogy, nobody thinks twice if it took me 4 hours to read a book and it took my husband 5 hours to read a book. Like, who cares? You read the book. You are totally capable. Some people are going to take a little bit longer to do it than others because that's just the way that we work. And so we feel really strongly that we can set a high bar for all of our students. And what we are going to do is adjust the timeline for how they get to that bar. And we think that's important. We also think that that adjustment should be done and hit at multiple levels. So this idea of, we started everybody together with the Habits of Mind class. We kind of went different directions. Some of them right now are in a Math 1 class, some are in a Math 2 class. and then we're going to bring them back together. So we have multiple points where they can intersect. We're not tracking the students. There will be plenty of opportunities for them to mix and match on the path that's right for them. We also are structuring our grading policies so that we are looking for understanding instead of compliancy type behaviors, as in, I did my homework and that counts as part of my grade. I know it because I did the homework. And all of us know that homework, especially busy work, is not where they actually learn. And so demonstrating their understanding of the material in a variety of ways is what we actually grade for. We also understand that that's not going to happen every time on the first time. So there are multiple opportunities to demonstrate mastery. So these are structural components built into our mathematics work. Marty's going to show you a rubric. This is the rubric that she used on the assessment, the test for this patterns kind of unit.
Yes. Yeah, so as you can see, this one, I think the in-class assignment is something we're going to discuss and figure out, but this one would be like, okay, now let me see if you can do this on your own. Let me give you something paper, pencil. Gave them a pattern. It was very open-ended, maybe asked a few questions like find figure 10 and do a few other things. What if we knew this many squares were in, which figure would that be? And then I just kind of wanted to leave it very open and see what they did. Notice mathematical errors is in there, but that's not the whole thing. So mathematical errors, if they got pretty much most of it right, 90 to 100% of it right, maybe they had a small error that really didn't depict like you didn't know something. It was just like a negative, or you forgot something small that was something little. But then like maybe there's larger mathematical errors that might need to be addressed. So that was in like the first one. And then like explanation, again, can you communicate? Can you discuss and tell me what you know and how you know it? And how concise and clear can you be? Kind of focusing a little bit more on the written. So in class, we're doing a lot of verbal and a little bit of written. So now can you take what you know and actually write it down in something clear and concise? Organization, if you graphed it, if you made a table. So the rule of 4 is really big in our class, rule of 4 being equations, graphs, tables, and words. We weave in and out of that constantly, like multiple perspectives, multiple connections to pieces. So how well is this organized? Did you label things? If you used a variable, did you define it? Is your graph, scaled and the axes clear? And then the next one I think is really cool is strategy. Like, what did you do to find your answer? Was it effective and was it efficient? So as we're looking at everybody's different strategies, once we know that all of them are true, we start looking at now, which one is the most efficient? Which one did you like the best? Which one do you think a mathematician might use and why? And so we are able to like dig in deep to like, all right, but which method would you choose and how would you redo this if you could? And that gets into a deeper level of thinking about the mathematics. And then the last one is reasoning and feedback. So can you discuss and reason clearly, but can you critique somebody else's? So for this one, I literally swapped papers with everybody and they filled out this rubric using someone else's paper. So they were able to look at the way someone else solved this problem and analyze and give them feedback for how well they hit mathematical errors, their explanation, their organization, and their strategy and procedures. If they're able to critique and look at someone else's work effectively, then they're really doing some deep learning within themselves as well. So this is kind of something that I was using with the students. It went over really well. They really enjoyed it. And there's nothing negative. I never dock points. There's nothing like percentage wise. You're just going to get a score here on the rubric. It's just circled and handed back. There's no like A or C, because that overall I feel like doesn't mean anything. And it takes away from the learning and the focus on feedback and what can I do next time to get better at this. They usually just look at the grade or the percent and they shut down or move on. And it's rare that they deep dive into their work. So I typically don't put a letter grade on anything until like the very end of class based on what they've shown me. So I kind of wanted to show you right now a little bit of my grading. So if I exit out of this guy, I'm still sharing the screen, right?
You are. It's
okay,
good.
Cool. So here's some sample students of the rubric. Now this looks like a lot. So tell me if you get overwhelmed here. This is brand new, like developed, tried to figure this one out. I'm using it. I used it for habits of mind. I'm starting to use it for this term as well, and I really enjoy it. It's based on standard. So like, here's the topics that you're covering. So like patterns, notice patterns are in there and linear functions are in there. We got some really specifics. And then over here in the crazy rainbow color world, I know, sorry, I love color, and there's a whole rainbow over there, and I was very proud of all my colors. But you see like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, that's actually DOK level. That's depth of knowledge. Most math teachers and math students operate only on a DOK level 1. Meaning, if I did a procedure, can you redo the procedure 50 times on your homework? It's very procedural, very regurgitated. It's recited. It's rote procedure. Like it's shallow understanding. I'm trying to push the students into deeper knowledge and deeper understanding. So like DOK level 2 is like applying. You can kind of see it here: applying, organizing, deciding, like which procedure and strategy should you choose for this problem? Can you explain it to somebody? Can you apply it to a new problem? Can you organize it? And then DOK level 3 is really non-routine. Maybe they've never seen this type of problem asked this way before. They're analyzing something, comparing it, contrasting it, conjecturing, meaning they've seen a pattern and they want to make a truth statement. Like, I think I'm going to generalize this for everything based on this pattern. And then level 4 is really difficult. It's probably not something freshmen are really ever doing very much. It's project-based extended thinking. It's usually over weeks of time. So that may be like 1 or 2 opportunities here or there, but I'm still putting it out there for students to see what that might look like, not expecting us to get there freshman year, but that's kind of the goal. So as they're getting 3s and 4s on their rubric, they get either a check mark. You guys can kind of see some check marks. They get the thing called a P or an E. P's meaning they showed me on a project, and E, they showed me on a test or exam. So the E stands for exam, the P stands for project, and whether it's either green or blue is whether they got a 3 or 4 on it, meaning advanced or proficient, but you showed me you did it, and you showed me you understand, and you're at this DOK level at this one specific thing. So it's kind of a lot. It's a lot to kind of look at. My students don't look at it very often. I'm usually the one just in it, and then I'm giving them feedback and I'm checking it off. But they have access to kind of see where they're at on each level. But I expect my students to fill out all of the DOK level 1 for all of the topics in that. That's like basic C level. You can do all the things and you can show me at a very thin level that you're doing stuff. So then DOK level 2 is more of the B range if you're filling this in. So like we might have a student that has filled more in and has done more and shown more either on projects or on exams. So they have more check marks and more exams or projects that are filled in. And then a few of you are going to see are starting to get into DOK level 4, but mainly like 1s and 2s are all filled in. If 1s and 2s are all filled in, then I'm thinking this is like A level. So this would be an A level habits of mind student. You're in the DOK level 3 for the majority, 3s and 4s. You've got your 1s and 2s pretty much checked off for each of them. But we have this range of students and they're all coming to us at different varying spots with various backgrounds and some gaps here and some gaps there. And I never kind of know where each one is, but this really helps me figure out what they know and what they don't know and how well they've mastered a topic. So if I have a student that, let's say they've really get rate of change, they get slope intercept, solving and systems, but they're really struggling with point slope, like horizontal and vertical lines, maybe some of the reasoning they're stuck with or inequalities, I can really target what they need at what level they need. And so this is where, based on how well they kind of performed a bit in habits of mind, is where we decided to slow down or speed up on math 1 versus math 2. So if they had some gaps or some areas that they needed to fill, I'm able to slow down with them and make sure those get filled at the level of at least level DOK 1 and 2 before we move on to the next subject. So instead of just saying, you have an A, yay, what does that mean? What topics have you mastered? What level have you mastered them at? This shows me very clearly what you have shown me The check marks are homework again, E's are exams, and P's are projects. So they can show me on any of those wherever they're at. And usually homeworks are in the DOK level 1 and 2 range. And usually exams can be 1, 2, 3, and projects are really going to be where we get into the DOK 3s and 4s, like the really deep stuff with projects. So I just wanted to share that with you right now, that students may be at different spots at different times. And I can actually continue this as well. So like my math 1 students can still go back and do this. My math 2 students, if they see like, ooh, I need to do another rate of change DOK level 1. Hey, Marty, can you give me a DOK level 1 question for like rate of change? I'm like, sure, here you go. And they can fill it in. Like, again, time is variable. I don't care when they master this, as long as they show me that they can master it and that they have it. Then I can go back and just fill this in, and this just can kind of grow and continue as they learn their math content through their 4 years. So I can keep adding topics, and we can keep spiraling back to topics to see if they still have those pieces. And I can keep adding to their kind of mastery, build out their mastery sheet, if that kind of makes sense. So that's what I'm trying to do for grading. Again, the first row is like C level. Do you have your basic understanding DOK level 1? How much of that is filled out? And then B level is like the DOK level 2. And then A is the 3s and 4s kind of sporadically filled in. Like if we can get half of those filled in at the 3 and 4 level, then you're at my A level. Then you're doing really good. You've got a deep understanding of this. So any questions, Yvonne? I think we got questions there on the grading thing.
I think we're good. And actually, I want to hit one more thing, and then we can come back to the grading. I do want to acknowledge that the grading rubric is a little bit overwhelming. It took us a couple of weeks with the students to really kind of like, okay, here's what's going on. But it significantly changed the conversation from why did you like give me this grade, or why, like, how come, like, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. It's really transparent. They understand what I need to work on. It also really normalizes the fact that you may not know this because you've never seen it before. So let's let you see it. And now that you've seen it, you're like, oh, okay, I know how to do that. So it really is opening up kind of the conversation that you are a product of your past, but you are not like locked in as the product of your past. And here are ways, like, you have your own agency, you're charting your course, here's what needs to happen, which goes back to our values and the things that we really care about with the students, is that we are holding them capable. We know that they can do this, and we're here to support you and kind of do that. Marty often will give individualized tests, like depending on where the students are at. So if this student is working a lot on their DOK 2s, the test is at the DOK 2 level. There is no point of putting DOK 3 or DOK 4 questions on a test when you know the student is not at that level. It is just a cycle of discouragement and failure and overwhelm. And so
when I shared this with them, I let them choose their questions. So for their final exam, they got to pick which topics and at what level they wanted those questions at. So each person's test last term was different based on what questions they needed to show me and which ones they thought they could be successful at. And a lot of them, which was very cool, kind of pushed themselves. So like, can I get a DOK 3 for that? And I'm like, DOK 3 level questions are really hard to write, first of all. But I'm like, sure, we will get you a DOK level 3 question for that one. It turned out being really fun. And they were doing some crazy problems on an exam that I've never seen students do before. Like, they're all empty boxes, and it was a solving equation and fill in the boxes to get the smallest value of X. Like, it was so an interesting type of question. Like, that was a DOK level 3 for solving equations. And it was just really fun. They got to be creative and try to test things out on non-routine problems. And if they don't get it wrong, if they get it wrong, there's no harm. Like, there's no negative points. It just doesn't get filled in right today. Like, maybe tomorrow, or maybe I give you some feedback, you show me you figured something out, and then I mark it. Like, that's fine too. So based on feedback and and evaluating something, they could come back with some mastery and I can mark it in their grade. So that's what I'm trying to go for here.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up and spend a few minutes talking about the 4-year trajectory of what your students will be taking. And so I've organized this essentially, we have the 3 terms, fall, winter, spring. 2 terms, remember, is a year's worth of content. So one of the things that I'm really appreciating about our schedule and our structure is that we have some flexibility to do some catch-up work or some like growth work in the school year instead of trying to like squeeze things in over summer back and forth. So this year, everybody started in habits of mind. So 9th grade, fall term, everybody took habits of mind. And then the group split into 2. We named them Math 1 and Math 2 because we were still sort of figuring things out, but that will become Math 2A and Math 2B. So some went into 2A and some went into 2B. And then next term, those that were in 2A now are going to take another term of math, and they will be caught up with the rest of the group. So they're going to have that by the end of this year. So that's a moment of where we're bringing everyone back together again. All of our students will also be taking data science in the spring. And data science is really a beautiful blend of math, of statistics, of
Storytelling.
yeah, storytelling, this idea of how you represent it. There's some computer science, there's graphics. And we believe it's a really important skill set for this generation. Next year, when they come in the fall, all the 10th graders are going to be at the same level, and they're going to take math as a 3AB, which means that it's a really differentiated class. And they may only do the A level content, or they may do the B level content. And again, then in the winter, there's a chance for them to sort of split off and just depend on what is fitting where I am right now and the content. And sometimes also what is going on in their personal world. A student that's got a family crisis, like a divorce or an illness or something like that, sometimes just doesn't have the bandwidth emotionally. Sometimes they have their own health issues. So there are a lot of different reasons to be able to like speed up or slow down. But they would have, again, another chance in spring to take the 3C level if that's what they needed to do. So that again, at 11th grade, the beginning of 11th grade, they are all at the same level again. In 11th grade, they could take pre-calc or they could take statistics. A few of students that I've had in the past have taken both of those at the 11th grade year. So then the statistics would be like one of their electives. And then we'll have other electives in the spring. So we can do things like a business math or an applied math or an intro calculus for medicine, or like things that are like really specific. So several electives that are appropriate for there. There'll also be some data science electives if they're wanting to go deep dive in some computer science. So sometimes there's some interesting intersections there. In 12th grade, if they already took pre-calculus, they could take calculus or they could take statistics, or if they had taken statistics, they now could take pre-calculus or however it works. Our vision really is all students should get through pre-calculus by the time that they graduate high school, and that it just optimizes how many options they have for college. Sometimes calculus is a great pass, sometimes statistics is a great pass, sometimes they want to take both of them, totally fine. Other electives that will be available after calculus would be things like a logic course or differential equations or a linear algebra semester, so that they could take a post-calculus course while they are still here with us. So we'll have some of those options as well. But this is sort of a map out of what their paths are going to look like, and wanting to give you an example of how they come together and they can split off, and they can come together and they can split off. Okay. We threw tons of things at you, and we were hoping to save, kind of the last 10 minutes. We got to 8 minutes. But for some questions, is there a slide that you want us to go back to? Are there wonderings that you have? I haven't seen anything showing up in the chat box so far, which makes me think that we are so compelling as speakers. Oh, yes. You just couldn't tear your eyes away.
Obviously.
Yes. But what are maybe some of the questions that you are wondering about, or we could go into a little more detail?
This is Sarah, the real Sarah. Uh, I appreciate just how thoughtful this all is, and it also seems really individualized, which I think is wonderful. I wonder how sustainable it is, Marty, for you to write tests for everybody as the school grows. Like, can you bring in, like these girls will be sophomores next year, and then you'll have a new class of freshmen. And that just seems like maybe a lot of work for you. So I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, growth and sustainability. Yes, very good question. No, I was thinking the same thing. Since we do have such small class sizes, though, even as we continue to grow and we bring in, the classes are going to be limited to some degree of how many we'll take in. And I'm assuming I won't be the only math teacher for like a few years. So it's actually not that bad. So I basically just create a huge test bank, and I can just continue to kind of add to the test bank. And since there's so many different tests and there's so many different questions, when you like cycle through, if we're talking like possible cheating between kids of seniors and freshmen, I think that would be a very difficult task. And I'd be like in awe if that's what they, chose to do. But I don't see right now as it being too bad. I had 180 students a day from where I came, and now I have 15, and in a few years I'll probably have 30, 45. So it's still a fraction of what I was, dealing with. And since, Yvonne and everyone are so thoughtful about prep time and class time, and I feel like I'm okay right now. On every class, having individualized tests, it may not work, but I think definitely for the first freshman year, as we see what they need and some gaps that we need to fill, once we can get them all with this basic foundational knowledge, I feel like we can move from there. But I really do hope that their freshman year at least is very targeted and individualized, and it feels tailored to them in a specific way that they feel seen and they feel like this is something they can do and they have control of. And then I think we can start moving into something more a bit traditional, sophomore through senior year. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, that was great.
Okay.
And I love it.
I
Great.
love that you are thinking about that, Sarah, and thinking about like the health and wellness of the teachers. Not everybody realizes that teaching is actually a pretty time intensive, often labor of love type field, in a way that I don't think it should be. One of the structural pieces that I am trying to map, and sometimes I don't get it quite right, but we are using those X days, those experiential days when the girls are doing different things. And so like the botanical gardens, when Katie and Lynn were taking them for the biology and also for the literary description component, that gives Marty and Crystal and I an opportunity to build curriculum and to be looking forward. So we don't always need all hands on deck. So we really are also using those X days as teacher collaboration and professional development as well.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a question? Go for it, Bob.
I don't really have a question. I have some comments that I love the fact that that you're layering in data science into curriculum. I'm in the technology field, and I'm perfectly aligned with everything that's related, and how how that can give them a real practical sort of view into not only potential jobs and things like that in the future, but the applicability of so much of the math, the math and the data and the common sense stuff that they could all relate to and build from. But I am curious about for the 11th and 12th grade, because you mentioned, if you go back to that slide, the statistics being a focus, and that's obviously a big part of data science these days.
Yeah.
Is statistics based, and I understand the pre-calculus because the larger world is focused on calculus and all that. And I like the fact that you're not minimizing the importance of calculus, but layering in all this other disciplines that are more applicable to the job market and, you know, will be beneficial to so many kids moving forward. So I would love to see, for instance, more stuff in the 11th and 12th grades for data science related things. And also, you know, things like, I always tell people, like, why didn't they teach us, you know, like financial applications, personal finance, you know, had the, you know, investments and, you know, real life stuff. I think kids can really get that now at younger ages. You know, they see startup companies and they see, you know, in Bay Area, they see people making tons of money. Well, how do they make all that money? You know, all those kinds of things are in personal finance. And, you know, I like the applicability of data science and financial sort of projects, I guess, if you will, rolled into the curriculum. So I love what you guys are doing here.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yvonne and I were going back and forth with the calculus and like, where do we put the calculus? And to be competitive, oh my gosh, we need to put it in the junior year. And I was like,
right,
where we can't, not if I feel like that lens and the focus on data science is important enough to embed in the curriculum, and they can do it as freshmen and sophomores. It's possible, and it needs, the sooner the better, that they can see. And when they're done with data science, it's basically the first semester of statistics really anyway, because it's got so much overlap. But I think that's where we gave the give and take of like, you know what, we're going to push calculus to senior year, and we're going to really have an emphasis on data science and make that built into the curriculum. And we're just going to kind of take this stand and see, you know, where it falls out. So I really appreciate, you know, as a parent, your perspective on seeing that and seeing the importance of not just the push to calculus, not just, oh, my kid's being calculus by 4th grade, or they're not going to get into Harvard. Like, it's so many, it's important. Yes. And we're a STEM school. Yes. And I love calculus personally, but you know, the number of professions using it versus the number of professions, and just being a human and a voting citizen with data science, like there's no question about how important that is on a day-to-day basis and in career.
It's great. It's so good that you have that enlightenment, because I mean, it makes so much sense that math needs to be, you know, even if they learn the basics of data science, they don't have to have a career in data science, but so much in business depends on people that are doing that work.
Consuming the data and seeing it and reading it. Yes. That's
right. So you got to be able to talk the language and understand a lot of basics these days. So that's great. I'm happy about that.
Judy, you got something.
Hi, thank you, Bob, for pointing out about personal finance. You know, I got an estimate for painting the total exterior of my house last week, and I asked Raina how much she thought it might be, and her estimate was like $2,000. You know, which I thought, okay, you know, when are you going to really learn, you know, what money can buy? So I appreciated that you put in, and maybe some way there can be an elective at some point on that, but not an elective, because the kids need to have it. It can't be one that they choose.
No, actually, it's one of their pathways classes that they're going to take. So we have a focus on entrepreneurism and finances, like the basics of finances and how money grows and works, and interest and those various components. And so it's not an option. They will all get it.
Yes.
Not this year. It's coming up, so we're scaffolding it. But yes, it's a language, and it is a language that we feel strongly that if we don't teach the kids to understand the basics, that we are disadvantaging them for future.
But we did last week go to that venture capital firm, and we spoke with, you know, $100 million firm, and how they support entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs, and just having that concept and that discussion alone just framed. And she was just like, what are your ideas? What should we fund? And the kids were like, what? And so like taking that idea of like, hey, there's people out there and this is an option and this is what it would look like. And then taking that into an entrepreneurship class next year and then framing that with finance. And then even in my math, like 3AB class, when we're talking about logarithms and exponential functions and interest rates, I usually show them like a copy of my like credit card statement with everything like, blocked out and stuff. But I show them what interest looks like and what would happen and how much do you think this is compounded and how much do you think how long is it going to take me to pay this off? And, their just concept of money is just kind of reshifted and rechanged when they're just looking at it in terms of like, this is real. This is real life. This is what happens. If you get a credit card, this is what's going to happen.
And also, the way the world is changing in the financial space, so considering, the way businesses work today and, how the financial institutions are set up, and the whole new evolution of blockchain and cryptocurrencies and all that kind of stuff that they hear about.
Yeah.
And you got all these kids, you got these young kids that are in high school that are, buying coin and stuff like that. Like they don't even know what they're doing.
NFTs, they're already investing.
And all that stuff, and they're all over the place. And it'd be great to layer in some of that sensibilities at some point later.
Yeah. Yes.
We will.
It's an exciting place to be.
It is exciting. And it's fun to build the curriculum thinking really from that lens of what do the students need, right? In their 12th grade year, one of their pathways courses was called adulting. Like, what do you need in order to adult, right? You need to understand a budget. You need to understand this and you need to understand that. You need to be able to cook some basic meals and, so some of these things. So it is layered in. We've appreciated your feedback so much for this evening. If you think of any other questions or comments, please feel free to email either Marty or myself or both. We do like talking about math. And it is something that we feel like is a language and can be a gate to get you into other doors. And traditionally, often it has been a barrier that kept you out. And we really intentionally want our approach here at SF Girls to be the gate, not a barrier. So thank you for spending time